Nobody voted him in. Nobody gave him a title. Smoke curls up into a cold sky 50,000 years ago. A dozen people sit around the fire, faces flickering orange, bellies half empty. Tomorrow's hunt matters. Get it wrong and someone doesn't eat. One man speaks. He says the herds moved east after the last rain, that the valley floor will be soft with tracks by morning. He isn't loud. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. The group goes quiet, not out of fear but respect. He's tracked well before. He's shared meat when others hoarded it. That's the whole resume, and it's enough. There's no throne here, no chain of command, no one asking permission to speak. And yet, somehow a decision gets made. Everyone agrees. Everyone follows without a single vote cast. No boss, no title, no meeting. Just proven skill, sitting quietly by a fire. Now picture your last team meeting. Someone's talking. They have the title, the corner office, the org chart, pointing straight at their name. But nobody in that room actually believes they've earned it. Not really. Not the way that hunter earned his say around the fire. That's the quiet frustration so many people carry into work every single day. The sense that authority and competence have somehow gotten divorced. You've felt it. Maybe you're feeling it right now, thinking about your own manager, your own mayor, your own CEO. For 95% of human history, leadership had to be earned constantly, proven daily, or it evaporated. Today, it can be inherited, appointed, or simply outlasted. That gap isn't just annoying. It's ancient instincts colliding with brand new institutions. And your gut has clocked the mismatch long before your brain caught up. So here's a question worth sitting with. If humans are wired for leaderless equality, how did we end up with kings? With CEOs? With dictators who've never tracked a single herd in their lives? Something broke. Or rather, something got traded away. Here's the part almost no one knows. The shift from earned leadership to inherited power wasn't slow, ancient, or inevitable. It happened astonishingly recently, tied to one specific decision our ancestors made about resources. A trade-off that quietly rewired everything about how humans follow, obey, and submit. Most people assume hierarchy is just human nature, baked in since the beginning. That assumption is almost entirely wrong. By the time you finish this video, you'll never look at your boss's title or your own resentment of it the same way again. But first, let's kill the myth everyone believes. You've heard the story. Humans are just animals, and animals have alphas. Someone's always clawing to the top, and everyone else falls in line behind them. It sounds like biology. It sounds inevitable. It's mostly borrowed from outdated chimpanzee research. And it gets humans almost completely wrong. Here's what actually happened for the vast majority of our existence. Hierarchy wasn't the default. It was the enemy. Foraging bands didn't tolerate bossy behavior. They actively hunted it down and stamped it out. Someone got too proud of a kill, mocked mercilessly until the ego shrank back to size. Someone tried bossing others around, gossiped about behind their back until their reputation was worthless. Someone kept pushing, ostracized, left to survive alone, which, for most of human history, meant not surviving long at all. This wasn't passive equality. It was aggressively enforced equality, maintained through humiliation, exclusion, and social pressure sharp enough to keep even the most ambitious person in check. Assumption: humans naturally sort themselves into hierarchies, the strong ruling the weak. Reality: Humans spent tens of thousands of years building elaborate social machinery specifically to prevent that from happening. So the question isn't, why did hierarchy emerge? It's, how did our ancestors' entire anti-hierarchy system get quietly dismantled? The evidence for how fiercely they fought against bosses is stranger and more deliberate than you'd expect. Anthropologist Christopher Bohm, Verify, Bohm, Hierarchy in the Forest, spent decades studying something that shouldn't have existed according to the old theories: human groups that actively, deliberately refused to be ruled. He called it reverse dominance hierarchy. Instead of the strongest person dominating the group dominated anyone who tried to become strongest. The pecking order got flipped upside down on purpose, over and over again. Bohm studied dozens of foraging societies across the globe. The Hadza of Tanzania, the Jew/Hoansi, often called the exclamation point Kungsan, of the Kalahari, groups scattered across continents with no contact with each other. And the pattern showed up again, and again, and again. The mechanics were remarkably consistent. A hunter comes back with an impressive kill. Instead of praise, he gets teased, mercilessly, deliberately, almost ritualistically. Anthropologists have a term for it: insulting the meat. The bigger the kill, the harsher the mockery, specifically designed to prevent pride from curdling into authority. If mockery didn't work, gossip escalated. Reputations quietly destroyed around other fires and other conversations, until an overly ambitious person found themselves socially invisible. If that didn't work either, the final tool was exile. And in small-scale societies with no supermarkets, no backup tribe, no safety net, exile often meant death. Here's the part almost no one knows. This wasn't occasional. It wasn't a quirky cultural footnote. Bohm estimated that egalitarian, anti-hierarchy social structures characterized roughly 95% of human existence as a species, meaning hierarchy, kings, and bosses are a genuinely recent invention layered on top of a much, much older operating system. 290,000 years, give or take, of humans existing on this planet. Only the last sliver of that, somewhere around 10,000 years, features anything resembling permanent inherited power. Put another way, for every 1 year humans have lived under kings, CEOs, and presidents, we spent roughly 29 years actively making sure no one could become a king, CEO, or president. That's not a minor statistical footnote. That's practically the entire story of our species, and most people have never heard a word of it. So, if egalitarianism was this deliberately, aggressively enforced, if entire social systems existed purely to crush ambition before it calcified into power, something enormous had to happen to break through all of that resistance. Something changed the math. Something made hierarchy suddenly worth the risk. Here's the fact that breaks the whole illusion. Hierarchy is only about 10,000 years old. In evolutionary terms, that's not history. That's barely yesterday. So what flipped the switch? Researchers studying the origins of inequality, including work like archaeologist Kent Flannery and Joyce Marcus's analysis of early social stratification. Verify, Flannery and Marcus, the creation of inequality, alongside wealth transmission research such as Madison et al.'s 2016 study, converge on a surprisingly unglamorous answer. Storage. Not conquest, not charisma. Storage. For nearly all of human history, resources spoiled, meat rotted, plants wilted. There was nothing to hoard because nothing kept. and you can't build a throne out of food that's gone bad by next week. Then came surplus grain, domesticated herds, land that could be worked, fenced, and passed down. For the first time, wealth could actually accumulate instead of evaporating. And once something can accumulate, it can also be unevenly accumulated. Suddenly, there was something worth defending. Something worth a wall around it, a guard beside it, an heir to inherit it. The old leveling mechanisms, the mockery, the gossip, the exile, worked brilliantly against a boastful hunter. They worked far worse against a family sitting on a grain surplus behind a locked door. This is the detail worth repeating to a friend. Hierarchy didn't arrive because humans suddenly evolved a taste for domination. It arrived because storable wealth made domination possible for the first time. And once possible, it became almost impossible to reverse. 10,000 years of kings, dynasties, CEOs, and career ladders, all resting on the simple fact that grain, unlike meat, doesn't rot by tomorrow. The old system wasn't defeated. It was simply outmatched by a new kind of math, one where hoarding finally paid off. To understand exactly how strange that shift really is, it helps to look at who never made that trade at all. Chimpanzees do not do subtlety. A chimp aiming for the top doesn't rely on gossip or awkward silences. He beats his way there, literally. Dominance is enforced through violence, intimidation, and the occasional coalition of allies who help him thrash his way to the top of the pecking order. Once he's up there, he stays up there through fear, not through favors owed. Bonobos, a close genetic cousin, run things almost the opposite way. Status flows through alliances, grooming, and social bonds, often organized around female coalitions, with far less physical brutality. Less punching, more politics. Humans weirdly went a third direction entirely. Not the chimp model, not the bonobo model. Something closer to a democratic HR department with teeth. Status earned through generosity and skill, enforced through mockery, gossip, and exile instead of fists. Here's the deadpan truth. Your group chat, the one where everyone silently agrees not to let one friend dominate every conversation, is running a more sophisticated leveling mechanism than most Fortune 500 boardrooms. Somebody gets a little too pleased with themselves, and within minutes, 3 people are quietly roasting them into humility. That's reverse dominance hierarchy, alive and well, just with worse lighting and better memes. Modern institutions, meanwhile, often reward exactly the behavior your group chat would immediately clown someone for. Self-promotion, hoarding credit, never admitting a mistake. Chimps fight for it. Bonobos network for it. Ancient humans mocked it out of existence. So how exactly did our ancestors decide who deserved to lead in the first place? Before all of that got overwritten? Egalitarian didn't mean leaderless. That's the part people get wrong. Even in the most fiercely anti-hierarchy foraging bands, certain people still rose. Quietly, temporarily, situationally. The best tracker got listened to about tracking. The most persuasive mediator got pulled in during conflicts. The most generous hunter got trusted with bigger decisions about food distribution. Leadership existed. It just wasn't a permanent job title. Researchers Joseph Henrich and Francisco Gil White verify Henrich and Gil White, The Evolution of Prestige, 2001, gave this a name, prestige-based leadership, and drew a sharp line between it and dominance-based leadership. Dominance says, follow me or face consequences. Prestige says, follow me because I've actually earned your attention. Here's what makes prestige fundamentally different. And this is the part that changes everything you thought you knew about how leadership worked. Prestige had to be re-earned constantly, every single time. A tracker who guessed wrong 3 hunts in a row lost his say. Immediately, no appeals process. A mediator who played favorites stopped being asked to mediate. There was no tenure, no golden parachute, no board of directors protecting someone's position after their competence quietly expired. Followership was a live vote, recast daily based on actual current performance. Not past reputation, not inherited status, not who you were related to. Compare that to now. A CEO can tank a company, walk away with an 8-figure severance, and land on another board within the year. A senator can be catastrophically wrong about something and still coast on incumbency for another decade. Prestige in the ancient sense would have evaporated within a week of that kind of track record. Most people assume leadership has always worked roughly the way it does now, earned once, then protected indefinitely. The evidence says otherwise. For the overwhelming majority of human history, authority was closer to a subscription than a deed. Active, ongoing, and instantly cancelable the moment it stopped being justified. Somewhere between prestige constantly re-earned and power permanently held, something got lost. And once you see what that something was, it's hard to unsee it in your own life, in your own workplace, your own government, your own quiet resentment toward people who've clearly stopped earning what they still hold. Here's the uncomfortable part. Your instincts aren't broken. The system is. That feeling you get watching an incompetent boss survive round after round of layoffs while better people get cut, that's not paranoia. That's 290,000 years of evolutionary wiring correctly identifying something deeply, structurally wrong. Modern institutions have quietly re-optimized for the wrong traits. Confidence gets mistaken for competence. Aggression gets rebranded as decisiveness. Credentials substitute for actual demonstrated skill. A diploma standing in for the tracking record a hunter would have needed to prove, daily with his own 2 hands. None of it requires re-earning anything. Once the title lands, it tends to stay landed. That's the exact opposite of how humans led each other for 95% of our existence. Ancient prestige was fragile, temporary, constantly retested. Modern authority is often durable, insulated, and increasingly disconnected from whether it's still deserved. This is why burnout doesn't just come from working hard. It comes from working hard underneath someone who never has to. It's why disillusionment with politicians doesn't fade. It compounds election after election, scandal after scandal, because the system was never built with an exile mechanism. There's no gossip network powerful enough to socially erase a senator. There's no insulting the meat ritual, humbling a CEO after a disastrous quarter. The leveling mechanisms our ancestors spent millennia perfecting simply don't exist anymore at the scale modern power operates on. You're not imagining the unfairness. You're not too sensitive about a bad boss or naive for feeling disgusted by a politician who clearly stopped caring. Your brain still runs on ancient software built for a world where power without merit got mocked out of existence within a season. Except now that same software is running inside institutions specifically designed to protect power once it's obtained, regardless of whether it's still earned. That tension between what your gut expects from a leader and what modern structures actually reward isn't a personal flaw. It's a mismatch between a nervous system built for campfires and a civilization built on locked doors and inherited grain. And once you see that gap clearly, it's hard to watch a boardroom, a cabinet meeting, or even your own team meeting the same way again. Let's walk back through it. For roughly 95% of human history, there were no bosses. Foraging bands enforced fierce egalitarianism through mockery, gossip, and exile. Anyone reaching for permanent power got cut down before it calcified. Leadership still existed, but it ran on prestige, not dominance. Trackers, mediators, generous hunters all earned temporary authority, constantly retested, never guaranteed. Then storage changed everything. Surplus grain, domesticated herds, land that could be inherited. For the first time, wealth could accumulate instead of rotting away. And once hoarding became possible, the old leveling mechanism stopped working. Hierarchy, kings, and eventually CEOs followed. That means hierarchy, that the entire structure most people assume is just human nature, is roughly 10,000 years old. A blink layered thinly on top of hundreds of thousands of years of a very different operating system. Your discomfort with unearned authority isn't cynicism, it's memory. Ancient evolutionary memory, quietly recognizing that something about modern power stopped requiring what it once required. The campfire never actually went out. It just got buried under boardrooms, titles, and inherited grain. Maybe that's the real inheritance. Not the crown, not the corner office, not the title on the door. Maybe it's this: a quiet, stubborn instinct passed down through hundreds of thousands of years that still knows the difference between a leader and someone merely occupying the seat of one. You were never taught to distrust unearned power. You were born already knowing it. Your ancestors spent nearly 300,000 years making sure of that, mocking it, exiling it, refusing to let it take root. So the next time you feel that flicker of resentment towards someone who stopped earning what they still hold, don't call it cynicism. Call it memory. Because somewhere underneath every boardroom, every campaign speech, every performance review, a fire is still burning. And around it, a very old voice is still asking the only question that ever mattered. What have you actually done to deserve our trust?